Good night, everyone. So good to see you tonight. We're going to have Derek Lewis on again from the Greenville County School Board. And we have a lot of questions tonight that we want to ask Derek about Greenville County Schools. We want to talk a little bit about the COVID response thus far, and also about how students are doing this year and what remediation efforts will be in place. So I'm going to invite Derek on. And of course, if you have any questions while we're live tonight, we welcome you to go ahead and chat in the comments. I see we already even have a question that's come up, and we'll try to answer those as we can once we get through our submitted questions. So Derek, thank you so much for coming on with us again. And I was just wondering if you could introduce yourself quickly before we start for those who haven't watched one of these chats before.
Sure. So thanks for having me again, and thanks for everybody for spending part of their Monday evening. I'm sure things are very hectic at home if they are at our house, and we're glad that we can spend a little time doing this. So I am Derek Lewis. I am the secretary of the Greenville County School Board, and this is my 6th year on the board. The area that I primarily represent goes from about Greenville High to Maudlin High School. So much of Augusta Road, Gower, Conisty, and Maudlin. In addition to being on the school board, I'm also the director of Greenville First Steps, and First Steps funds programs to help get kids ready for kindergarten, which is where we actually got connected with Kidding Around Greenville, and we've been doing a lot of parenting programs and helping to raise awareness about those through our partnership with Kidding Around Greenville. And so I'm happy to be here to answer questions about any of those things, but it sounds like we're going to talk about school board stuff tonight. In addition to being a school board member, I'm also the spouse of a Greenville County School public school teacher. Hedrick teaches at Berea Elementary School in the kindergarten, and our son William is in 4th grade. So we talk about school stuff every morning, noon, and night.
I bet. And that's one of the reasons why we loved having Derek on here, because not only does he have a wealth of experience, you know, with his positions in Greenville, but he has a wife who's a teacher and has a kid at school. So it helps you have so much experience. And before we get started, I'm just going to give a quick commercial. Everyone, at 8 o'clock, we're posting a video for Greenville First Steps about maximizing love and minimizing stress. And it's really cute and fun. So after this, you need to make sure you watch that. It'll be on at 8. But to jump right in, I wanted to start by just asking you, I know there's been a lot of news about the grades for students and how students are performing. So could you just share with us really quickly, what are the grades like for students in virtual and in-person school this year?
Sure. So we are just kind of starting now to kind of look at Q1 and Q2 grades. And I know when Q1 grades came out, there were a lot of questions about the number of Fs that students got, which I think raised concerns among parents, around the community. Definitely the board spent a good deal of time talking about the number of students who had not passed either a class or multiple classes. In the fall, we had about 8,500 students with Fs in face-to-face or brick and mortar, and about 1,900 Fs in the virtual. I'm sorry, in the about 7,400 kids with Fs in the virtual program, which proportionally means we had a lot more students who had Fs who were doing 100% virtual than we did students in the brick and mortar, because those virtual kids only represent about 25% of our students' population, but they represent almost half the Fs that we got.
Yeah.
When we took a deeper dive into that, one of the things we found, though, was that the majority of those students who didn't have passing grades, it was because they had zeros. So there were a good deal of assignments that students had not submitted. So the district's been working really hard on that, and what we've found is that as our kids are now coming back to school more often, we've reduced the number of students with Fs in brick and mortar pretty significantly. We went from about 8,500 to about 7,200, but we're still hovering at that 7,500 number for virtual. So we've still got a ways to go with our virtual students and getting work completed. There's also, Hedrick teaches in the virtual program, and certainly not in her class, she would say, but in other classes, there are also some questions about student engagement. I think a lot of families chose virtual for a lot of different reasons. And what I'm experiencing is that some families chose virtual for health concerns. Some families who chose virtual probably should be in face-to-face because I think their children may need those kind of daily supports. that they may not be getting at home. And so the district has had to work really hard with how do we kind of rebuild those relationships with those parents so that we can get those students back to face, or at least get them back engaged. They're in virtual.
Right. Now, how does all of this affect in particular our third graders? Because we know that's a crucial year as far as children being held back.
So one thing that we learned that I thought was really interesting is we looked at benchmark data. So we use Mastery Connect as benchmark data. And what it essentially does is it allows teachers to look real time at how students are doing compared to students like them that were in the class maybe the year before. But a teacher can look at any specific lesson or any specific learning objective within that lesson and see like, oh, 50% of my kids didn't know this, and last year 80% of them did. And so that benchmark data is very helpful for teachers. What we're finding is that in ELA, our third grade scores actually went up this year. So students who were in ELA this year compared to third grade students from last year are 0.9 of a point higher, which is, not a significant number, but it's also showing that we didn't see the kind of decline that we feared we would see with English language arts. Now, math scores are down, and I think that's, it probably makes sense. I, as a parent, can probably help my child complete his English, his reading assignment, his spelling words. I can help him read for his social studies. I'm not really great at teaching him how to divide fractions, and so I think the limitations maybe that families may have experienced may be reflected in what their kids were able to gain or not gain while they were at home. So in general, we found that English language arts, social studies, those scores actually did pretty well. It's our math and science numbers that we're going to need to do some work on ramping those kids back up.
Yeah, and I get that. I mean, we've had tears in our house this week over fractions. So I think that's something, as parents, many of us are experiencing.
I wouldn't say that I love living through other parents' pains, but some people's Facebook posts are amazing. And the one that said, forget it, we're going back to carrying the one, and we're just going to do old school math. I think that was the reality of what we are in. And hopefully, things are looking better, and we should see a return to school. And I think these remediation efforts that the district has in place should allow us to use the spring, the summer, and the fall, and really get these kids back where they should be.
Yeah, and that's what I would like to talk to you about next. We know that Greenville County Schools has received funding to help with remediation efforts. And I would just like to ask if you can explain to us what these funds are going to be used for.
Sure. So the funding generally is coming from the CARES money. So if you remember, there were 2 rounds of CARES Act. There was the money that came with your first check that you got from the government, which came kind of in early fall. And then there was the second round that was approved in December. And so we have, with each of those pots of money, and then there's some other funds, we have some stipulations both on when it can be spent and what it can be spent on. And so collectively, what we have approved is about $38 million of those CARES dollars for remediation efforts. So that's what they were designed for. They're not part of our regular budget. They were part of the CARES Act money specifically for remediation. So you're going to see some of that money go towards things like before and after school. So this spring and in the fall, all of next school year, it's going to fully fund basically 18 months of before and after school, which will be, all of these are optional programs. Now, optional means we may strongly encourage you to do it. But they are all optional. Before and after school care will come with transportation. So if you're a bus rider and you want to participate in before school or after school, the bus can come get you 15 minutes earlier or get you to school 15 minutes earlier, so you can do that. And about 10 million of that's going to be of the 38 million, about 10 of it's before and after school. The other big chunk of it is summer camps. So we will have 2 summer camps. We will have a summer camp in the summer of 2021, which is 6 months from now, 5 months from now, and then another summer camp in the summer of 2022. So this CARES money is going to allow us to carry these services for about 18 months. Those 2 summer camps, the other thing that will be unique about them is there will be a summer camp at probably every single school in the district. So in the past, in my area, for example, if you were going to summer camp, you went to Sarah Collins, even if you didn't attend Sarah Collins, because it was the closest school in the district that offered summer programs. But now at probably at every elementary school, middle school, and high school, there will be summer programs. I say probably for two reasons. One, technically the board hasn't voted on this. We vote tomorrow night. We voted on it 2 weeks ago to send it to the board, and it passed unanimously. So I expect it to pass, but it hasn't passed yet. And I'm not certain. The other probably is a lot of this is going to be based on staff's willingness to work during the summer. And so, we've got to work on convincing our teachers. And, as I mentioned, I'm married to one who's exhausted every day. And so convincing these teachers that not only have they got to recover mentally from probably the hardest year they have ever had in the classroom, but we also need you to come back, in the middle of June and July and do some more instruction. Generally speaking, we have a pretty good high success rate at getting teachers to do that, but that will be a challenge, which may limit some of the things that are available, right? So if there's not a teacher who's an expert in calculus who's willing to come during the summer, that may limit the amount of calculus instruction that could happen at a specific high school. The other stuff is pretty much just tutoring and aids. We at the high school level, we're hiring additional staff who can pull students out during their day. And then at the elementary middle school level, we're hiring interventionists the same way. So they can pull out small groups of kids that may be struggling with that one unit of fractions and work with them while the rest of the class maybe is working on something else. So about a third of this money is towards summer camps, about a third towards before and after school, and about a third towards hiring some additional staff to be able to kind of work on that one-on-one basis.
Okay, and I just want to remind our readers that we can see your comments. So if you do have questions that this brings up, feel free to drop them there and we'll try to answer them. I do have a quick follow-up question on the summer sessions. So when you talk about summer camp, are there any idea on like what the hours would be of that yet?
So I don't think all of that's been worked out.
Okay.
Generally speaking, I think usually summer camp is from 8-ish to 2-ish. But I don't think all of that's been really fully fleshed out. And I think the staffing question may drive some of that because we may have to change the hours based on the availability of staff or whether we have to combine sites.
And do you know yet, will it be just in person or will there be an online option too?
I think the plan is for all the things that I described here to be in person. I think there are some additional interventionists that may be able to provide some support to students who are in the virtual program. But I think the real goal here is to get those virtual students back into the school and back to face-to-face instruction or at least remediation. And so, the summer might be a perfect opportunity for that because our numbers will be smaller, it'll be a lot less crowded. Hopefully our COVID numbers will have continued to improve. So, that would be my personal goal is that families become more comfortable with the idea of sending their kids back in the summer. And maybe that's a transition to getting them back into the classroom in the fall.
So, along with talking about school right now, can you tell us, will there be state testing this year?
So currently the state superintendent of education, Superintendent Spearman, has asked for a waiver from the federal government to exempt us from state testing.
Okay.
The federal government, this was when Betsy DeVos was in the U.S. Department of Ed, did not respond to our waiver request. So currently our waiver is still out there. And if that waiver is granted, then there won't be state testing. But because they haven't responded to it, I would say we should go. We are currently preparing for state testing, and we'll have to do the full battery of standardized testing unless that waiver goes forward. So right now we've sorry, go ahead. No, so we've done all we can kind of do on our end, and now we've changed administrations. We have a different president. We also have a different U.S. Department of Education. We assume, based on preliminary conversations, that they are open to this idea of testing waivers for districts that are open face-to-face, or states that are open face-to-face. And And so I would expect that that's going to be considered, but it's also February and we've got to start doing these tests in March. So the time window is pretty short for us to get the waiver. So I would assume that we're going to have the tests unless something happens really quickly.
So then following up on that, if a child does not do well, are they going to have to repeat a grade right now on the state testing?
Yeah, Bethy, I don't know the answer to that question. I will write. There's a few questions I know I won't know the answers to, but I'll get you answers to them, and then if you don't mind just sharing them with the group, I'll find out.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I know the next thing we really wanted to talk about was just if you could talk to us a little bit about what to expect for next year and what you know about next year. I know that we have a lot of people asking about what COVID precautions are going to be looking like. We had a mom write us and she said, my son is starting kindergarten this fall. What do you anticipate regarding COVID safety measures, if any, at the start of the school year? I'm especially curious about whether children will be required to wear masks, but also would like to know about any other routines, protocols that will likely be in place.
I think that the place where I would look to try to predict what's going to happen in the fall would be the CDC guidelines.
Okay.
You know, the CDC just released some new guidelines that now school districts are starting to look at, which has caused a lot of pressure on school districts and state departments of ed that aren't currently open. And so I think we need to look at those guidelines. If the guidelines from the CDC for the fall are the same as they are now, then I would say, yes, you should expect to see masks in the classroom. You should expect to see plexiglass. You should expect to see some form of social distancing. Although if the state General Assembly has their way and we are required to be open 5 days a week face-to-face for instruction, we may have to get an exemption from social distancing because we can't fit all of those high school kids into those classrooms and keep kids 3 or 6 feet apart from each other. So in some places, I think there may be state or federal laws or regulations that may dictate what we do. But in general, I would say we're gonna be looking to the CDC's guidelines to kind of help us drive the decisions that we're making. I would expect, barring some major decline in COVID numbers to pre-March levels, that we're still going to see much of the things we have in place now carried over for the fall. We probably won't know a lot of that until June or July, when the large portions of our community who want to become vaccinated are, and whether that has an effect on our COVID spread rates.
So I'm sure this probably resembles some of the other answers, but do we know yet whether there'll be field trips or not?
I have not heard a discussion about whether there are field trips or not. That was a decision that the administration made, so the board doesn't have to take action for us to go back to having field trips. It was something that they did as part of their plan. And it would be my guess that it's their desire to see parents return to schools, parent assemblies, PTA nights, field trips, all those things kind of returning as they can, as the conditions on the ground allow for them. But right now, I wouldn't expect any for the rest of the school year, certainly not.
And I also wanted to ask you, I know we've seen a lot of questions from people who, were following along as the original guidelines for Greenville County schools were put in place at the beginning of the school year. And, some of the protocols of what actually has happened in the schools is different than what was the original plan at the beginning of the year. I was wondering if you could just speak to that and explain why there were changes this year from what was originally published for families.
Sure. So one thing I would say, if you go back and look at the document that was published, it was a reopening plan. So it was published as a what would it take for us to be able to open our doors plan. And a lot of those things that were put into place were based on those conditions, right? But then that was August, and as time has gone on, we have learned that there are things in that plan that weren't realistic. There are things in that plan that were unnecessary, but there were also things that we could do because we learned about them. So Nowhere in the reopening plan is plexiglass listed. Nowhere in the reopening plan did we talk about the fact that we could get students to be 3 feet apart from each other and have a plexiglass divider, and that'd be considered the equivalent of 6 feet. So once the medical professionals said these two things are equivalent, then it allowed us to adapt our plan and use that new science information to make better decisions. And so I think that we're going to continually be looking at other districts. Tomorrow we've got an hour-long discussion about what's happening in Charleston, because MUSC just recently completed a study of all of Charleston's practices and procedures.
Okay.
So we asked that physician to come and give us an update. What have you learned that is or isn't happening in Charleston that may be very similar to what could be happening here if we did things differently? So I would want people to feel comfortable that this administration has been very careful. In fact, I think probably most of the complaints we get is that we are too slow to adopt and adapt. And I appreciate his steady approach to making sure that we're working through it. And then it's just our responsibility to make sure that we're looking at other opportunities to help us get more kids into the building as quickly but as safely as we can. I think the other part, though, is that we also owe it to our staff to make sure that they're comfortable with the plans that we have in place. So we could have very easily had all teachers say, "Yep, sounds great. Let's send all those kids back," and then rushed all the kids back, and then realized that we had put them at risk. And so I think, when you look back at the fall, for example, and adding 1 grade a week over the fall for elementary school was probably not necessary from a CDC perspective, but I think it built a level of comfort among our staff that allowed us to get to the 4th and 5th graders and say, okay, well, we're 60% at capacity, and so far we've demonstrated we can handle lunchrooms and we can handle changing classes. Let's add these other 2 grades. And I think doing that well with elementary school allowed us to do it with middle school. So, I think this is going to continue to be an evolving thing. And I wouldn't look at any document or statement or email or presentation and say, this is what we're absolutely going to do going forward, and not change that.
That makes sense. I have a reader question now that came in, and for those of you who are writing questions in the comments, just so you know, I am seeing those, and I'm going to go through them once we're done with the questions we have already put together. Someone wrote us and they said they would like to know how the Career Center classes and dual credit with Greenville Tech will fit into the 4x4 block schedule next year.
So this is a question. So for those of you who may not be familiar, about a half of our high schools are on a block schedule, and about half of them are on a traditional schedule. And the primary difference is the number of hours per week that a student spends in a specific class. One of the reasons that we needed to change that is because it became very clear that students could not transfer from one of our high schools to another without losing incredible amounts of seat time. And in fact, sometimes as we looked at students, particularly in highly transient populations, they may transfer from one school to another once or twice a year and end up by their senior year being a full year behind because they're losing all of these credit hours. So the principals got together and started looking at what, if we were going to go with one plan, which one would be the best for everyone to adopt. And so they moved to this idea of the block schedule. One of the things I have heard from principals who voted to move to block is that one of the big benefits of it is it actually offers you more classes that you can take. So it should actually increase the number of opportunities you have to do dual credit, because it also aligns with the college class schedule. Increase the number of maybe electives. So maybe you decided to do machine tools at the Career Center. Well, now you can also do mechatronics. And so it should actually increase participation. As we talk to staff who work in the arts, for example, they found that in a block schedule school, kids are more likely to participate in fine arts programs because they can add those things to their schedule because they have, a certain number of extra classes that they can choose from. as we talk to principals, one of the other things that attracted them for that reason, though, is it also means at the school level we'll be able to add more classes. So a principal who really wants to see that very specific AP class that may not be able to take in a traditional schedule. Well, with a block schedule, now we may have the ability to free up a teacher to start a class and grow a class. And so, civics class or a class that may not be attractive to large swaths of students, you could start now with a smaller class and kind of give it a few years to incubate. So at least as I talk to principals, they think that it's actually going to increase the number of opportunities that students have to take classes. Now we'll spend more time per day in a class. And so that is, the one negative that I have heard from principals who work in a block schedule is, teachers have got to rethink how they deliver content, because you can't lecture for that entire period of time. But as we talk to most principals, most teachers will tell you, we shouldn't be lecturing to high school students anyway. So, this may also force us to be more creative at a time when we really need to be doing that anyway.
That's interesting. Okay, I'm going to throw a question from the comments up here. There's a lot of discussion in the comments about teachers and vaccines.
Yep.
I was wondering if you'd be able to speak to what the board is doing to ensure that the teachers can be vaccinated.
So if you're not familiar with the vaccine schedule that DHEC rolled out, they basically put different groups of people in different orders. And so Group 1A is where we currently are. And Group 1A is medical professionals, people who are kind of frontline emergency service workers. And then it included people who were 70 and older. Group 1B included teachers. In some drafts, it included daycare workers. It included people who were 65 and older, and it included other groups of people. And so we were getting this kind of next group of folks. So what we recognized is, on one hand, we have a governor who is saying schools need to be open. We need everybody back at school. We need to do this. But he wasn't putting teachers in that first tier. So here is a no-cost option that could accelerate making sure that the people that we want more than anyone to be open, to make sure that those services are available so that families can return to work, so that we can help our kids catch up academically, they're all there. So we've been working with our delegation to make sure that they continue to put pressure on the governor's office to move teachers from Group 1B to 1A. So there is currently a bill that's going through the House through the Senate that was favorably moved out of the Senate. And it said teachers move from 1B to 1A. Now, the governor has still said he doesn't want to do that. And so I think it's going to have to pass the House, and we're going to have to force his hand. He believes that vaccinating 65-year-olds should be the next priority. I'm not a scientist, and I wouldn't want to weigh in on which is a greater risk to our community, vaccinating teachers or not, or vaccinating 65-year-olds or not. But I know if we want our schools to be open, we need to vaccinate the staff who are working in those buildings. The bill that's come through the Senate, I'm supportive of, because I think it does two things. One, it says, here's what we do. We hit pause right now. We vaccinate all of our teachers and all school staff right now. Then by middle of April, we open our schools 5 days a week. Because if we've done A, we should be able to do B, and that should help with a lot of our schools that are uncomfortable with reopening. We're currently open 100% for kindergarten through 8th grade and 80% for high school. There are still districts that are virtual, and there are some districts that have remained virtual. And so I think this would allow them to maybe get some comfort around that challenge of putting an adult in a room with children, but also being kind of in a confined space with a bunch of other bodies. So I think it's important, and I think you're going to see this board continue to work with our delegation, because I think what we've found is the governor is not responding well, I don't think, to teachers groups asking for this. So how do we get the chamber, how do we get our delegation to put more pressure on him by passing this legislation, I think is the solution.
Thank you. We have a lot of people advocating for teachers in the comments. See if I can find the other question. Brandon early on said, when are we going to get these teachers some raises for the awesome job they do every day? Are you able to speak on teacher raises at all?
Brandon, I 100% agree, and I'm hearing a cheer from downstairs, which means my wife is still watching the Facebook feed, so she also agrees. The first thing that happened was there was a raise. There was a step increase and an increase that was approved in the winter of last year, pre-COVID. When we got to the summer of COVID, the General Assembly froze all of those increases because they weren't sure how bad, particularly the tourism economy, was going to be affected by COVID. So they basically just redid the year before's budget and froze all those salary increases. So one of the first things that came out of the General Assembly this spring was to redo that. And so the House has passed it. It came out unanimously. And so it's passed the House. Now we need it to pass the Senate. The version in the House says we're going to make it retroactive. So it actually says we're going to approve this step increase that the teachers should have gotten on July 1 of 2020. And on whatever date we approve it, they're going to get a single lump payment that will go back to July 1 and catch them up for all of the time that they should have received it. Generally, a step increase is about $2,500. So it's not nearly enough to do particularly what Brandon's talking about, which is rewarding these teachers for all this work we've done. So the second thing we did was we approved bonuses. So we approved a $1,000 bonus actually for every employee at the district, because we felt like not only should we reward teachers, but we should reward our media center specialists who also are working in the classroom but don't typically get things that are given to teachers. But we should also reward our bus drivers and our food service staff who may be paid at an hourly rate, but who this $1,000 bonus actually would make it a significant difference to them when you look at their rate of pay compared to what teachers are. So I think the board felt like everyone should get a $1,000 bonus, and that's been approved, and I believe they've been processed. I'll have to check on that downstairs because I don't remember seeing it show up in our banking account. So it may have been spent before I saw it. But I think the other thing you're probably going to see, based on Superintendent Spearman's request, is probably a second step increase and salary increase that should come through the General Assembly this spring that would be effective July 1. So, I believe with all my heart that teachers are a historically underpaid profession, and we've got to do better. We moved starting pay up to $40,000 in Greenville County, and my hope is that will force the state to move starting pay up throughout the state, which will allow us to then move our pay up. I personally, and I'm just speaking as Derek school board member and not the board, I'd love to see a goal to get our starting pay up to $45,000 within the next few years, which would then put us above the national average. So we've got some work to do, but we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, we have several comments about how much the teachers deserve a raise. And Janelle says the bonus did come through. So we have a couple teachers, they got their bonus. So
I'm going to talk about that at dinner tonight. You really do. I mean, I know a lot of folks, as I see the chats, are friends of mine who work in our schools. And I just think we'd be remiss not to really celebrate that. It was about a year ago that they went home on a Friday thinking, we'll see you guys all on Monday. And then Sunday afternoon, they were told, nah, we're going to do virtual. And based on a decree from the governor, just completely pivoted the entire way we deliver public education from a traditional model to 100% virtual with no extra pay, no extra incentive. Just, you got to get this done because kids are going to be in school in 24 hours. And I just think that that's a really remarkable thing that we have done over this last year. And the number of hours that I know my wife has spent, and I'm certain as I talk to other teachers, they have spent and continue to spend, rewriting the way they deliver public education to kids, not just remotely, but, to kids who also need some different type of social and emotional support that they needed 12 months ago. It's just a really incredible work. And I'm just so thankful that we are in a district where we were able to really support our staff in doing that work.
Yeah, and teachers, we really appreciate you. We see several of you are watching right now, and we appreciate all the work you're doing. So, Derek, I wanted to ask you, what do you believe are the biggest challenges facing Greenville County schools this summer and next year?
So I think that the two biggest things, one we've talked about a lot, and we're going to continue to talk about, and that's remediation. We've just got large numbers of kids who are struggling to catch up, but are also really challenged with significant social emotional difficulties that we've got to address their academic performance, but also put our arms around these kids in ways that can support them emotionally. And I think that the plan that the administration has given us is going to help us work towards that. But I was talking with Hedrick's principal last spring, and he was saying, if we're talking about these kids not being at school for a year, it's going to take us 5 years to catch that up. So I think this plan here is a bullet train towards solving that problem. So before and after school remediation, pulling kids out in small groups, summer camps, I think all of that is going to be the biggest challenge this district is going to face this year. But the other one is teacher recruitment and retention, which we have always had as a challenge. But if you look around our schools now, what we've seen is there were a large number of teachers who were planning to teach last year, who in the summer said, you know what, this is too much. And most of them were teachers who had already retired. And so they were kind of coming back for their second stint as a teacher. But we lost a lot of really qualified, experienced teachers. And we aren't seeing huge numbers of teachers come out of graduate programs. And so it's not just that we can't keep people, and it's not just that people are unhappy, and it's not just that, this district is competing with teacher programs from all over the country. All of those are true, and we've got to work on all those things. But we have a teacher pipeline issue, and we've got to figure out a way to get middle school and high school students excited about getting into this profession. And some of that is about professionalizing this profession and not looking at them as childcare workers, but looking at them as people who make a huge difference in the future of our community. And some of it is about pay and about making sure that when you look at, do I want to work at a bank or do I want to work at a classroom, that as a finance person, can you see those as being equivalent callings? And if the pay's $30,000 difference, they're probably not. So, we do have a long way to go. We have come a long way. But if we can't recruit and retain the best talent in this district, then, we're going to continue to have challenges with helping our schools move forward.
What do you think have been the biggest wins for Greenville County schools and their students this year?
Well, we talked about one with the pivot, and I just think it is not overstated to repeat what an incredible mountain these teachers moved in a 24-hour, 48-hour period. And if we can do that, we can rethink how public education is delivered. There are some really cool things that are happening in schools right now that I would never have thought 12 months ago we'd be seeing. We've got high school students who are virtual, but are working 30, 40-hour a week jobs, and are able to, because we're kind of not so married to that seat time requirement, are able to successfully complete their work, do their assignments, and have a meaningful job, which is not only perhaps supporting them, but maybe even a job that's supporting their family. So, we never would have talked about, that 12 months ago. We've got families that have one kid at school face to face and one kid virtual, because they now realize there are choices that are available to them that they can see this is best for this child and it's terrible for the other child. My son needs to be face to face. He needs positive social interactions with people all the time, and we need to build that for him. But not every kid does, and I've seen other kids that are friends of his who are really, really doing great with being virtual and kind of learning in front of your computer and then turning it off and going away and doing something else. So I think there's some big lessons that I believe once COVID has passed and once we kind of have moved beyond the crisis, that may cause us to rethink why do we do the things we've done the way we've done them for 60 years? What could we do differently with our arts programs, for example, because we now have virtual access. If we've got teachers that are excellent at teaching a specific lesson, then why can't they be the expert on dividing fractions for the entire district and not have to feel like that somehow makes the current teacher less of an instructor? They're probably excellent at something else that this teacher could use. So, I look at the Roper Mountain Science Center, for example, and some of the stuff they've been doing virtually is it's just out of this world.
Right.
Nothing's going to replace going to the Heritage Farm, and nothing's going to replace visiting the touch tanks. I mean, you need to touch the manta ray to experience it. But there's some really cool stuff that's happening virtually that we would never have done 12 months ago.
That's a really interesting observation. For our viewers, I see a question or two in the comments. I'm going to pull them. If I missed your question, because we did have a lot of comments tonight, feel free to email me after this is over and I can send it to Derek. But I wanted to put up this one. Jen wants to know, has there been a large increase in cases being reported at the schools? I am in healthcare and my kids are virtually schooling, but deciding on safety when considering returning to school next year. Thank you.
So we look at the numbers that we get from the district about every 2 weeks. And so we're seeing trend numbers, and we're also looking at the DHEC numbers that come out for the state. I look at those every week as well. And we are seeing that there was a large increase in cases when kids came back from Christmas. And there was a 2-week window where things spiked in our schools just like they spiked at home. We are seeing, though, that those numbers are starting to decline, and that they're pretty significant declines that are at the same rate at our home and at our schools. So I think things are getting better, but certainly not to a place. I mean, I believe the last numbers I saw, our spread rates currently were where they were in early November. So if you think of it as spiking in mid-December, we're now back to those kind of early November days. We're still not back to July days, which, when I think back to the first call that we had, looks like a valley now compared to where we were.
Yeah, July seemed a lot higher back when we were in July than it does now.
Yeah. So I realize it's getting a lot darker here. I'm going to turn the lights on.
Okay, you're fine. I actually have another really great question from Jen. So Jen, you get the prize for having such great questions. She wants to know, will kids that are virtual this year be able to have a spot for in-person next school year, or is it a lottery again?
So it depends on what she means by lottery. So let me answer the question. And if I don't answer it, ask me again and we'll fix it. So if you chose to go virtual, you were given an email, I think a few weeks ago, that said, tell us now what you're thinking. Are you planning on going back or not? And it's my understanding that if you said yes or no to that answer, then that space is being held for you. Okay. Now, my understanding is there's going to be another round of that question to be asked in the spring later on. And then it will be, as we can fit you in, yes, we would like for you to come back. I mean, clearly, as we talk about numbers, we're experiencing that it would be better for students to be back in school than be virtual. So we're gonna work on that. Now, if by lottery she means that she's a magnet parent, or that she entered a choice lottery at a specific school, then I don't know the answer to that. I think that I understood, but I'll double check that if you were a choice family and you chose to go virtual, that they did not guarantee you a spot to be able to come back the next year. But I will double check that.
Okay. Yeah, Jen, feel free to email me if you want to clarify that at all. So I want to close with asking you, how can parents who have kids in the GCS system help them succeed?
So, Bethany, if you could copy Erica McCall's post here about parents reading every night.
I was just thinking we need to put that on the screen.
She's one of my favorite people, and I just am so glad that she said this, because you can tell when someone is a media specialist. There is nothing that parents can't do, but the most important thing that families, I believe, from my First Steps work and from my work on the school board, is to read to your kids and have them read to you every single day. Pre-COVID, post-COVID, intra-COVID, whatever it is, that has been, I believe, the most important and most valuable thing that families can do all the time. And Bethany, I believe if they contact you, you can help them figure out ways to get books from First Steps if they've got preschool parents, and so we can certainly help them with that. I think that I think the data points that we looked at earlier kind of reinforce this, right? That families can make a huge difference and even prevent learning decline with English and language arts, even during COVID. And I'm certain that my son didn't see a decline wasn't because I am an incredible reader, and it's not because I'm great at teaching him spelling, but it's because we were working those muscles, and we can do that. And I think every family can do that. The math and science is harder, and I believe that that's why a lot of these interventionists are going to be doing that. But I think the more we spend reading with our kids, regardless of whether we think they're struggling or not, I think just the better our community will be. And so I think that would be my number one answer.
And I'm going to just use this as an opportunity to give a plug for our pop quizzes that we're doing. I don't know if you all have joined those yet, but we have another one planned. It's going to be really fun, Disney trivia. But we're going to be giving away all these books at them, plus gift cards. So that's another great way to get books, is just to show up for that, and you might win.
Because First Steps was really blessed.
A lot of books.
Yeah, First Steps was really blessed. We received about $4.5 million from the county to help with all the child care work, and about 300,000 of that went to books, which is more books than we have ever bought at First Steps. And so we have these great libraries of preschool age books and school age books, and these giveaways have been a great way for us to get books into people's homes. So you should definitely stay tuned so you can figure out how to get books.
And
they're good ones too, like Dog Man. And
Erica's adding on to her reading stuff. She wants all the dads to read too.
Yeah. We are reading Calvin and Hobbes at our house downstairs 3 nights a week, and then he likes to snuggle with Mom 4 nights a week. So I don't get the most nights, but it's all right.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Derek, for coming on tonight. And like I said, I'm going to put my email in the comment thread. It's just Bethany@KiddieAroundGreenville.com. If we missed your question, or if you didn't get a clarified answer to your question, you can always email me, and I'll make sure we get an answer for you. But Derek, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for all of your advocating for our teachers, and for all the work you do in the community. So, and thank you all. If you have a question, just leave it in the comments for us.